Well, welcome everyone. I'm Victoria Cobb, President of the Family Foundation of Virginia, and I'm joined today by our Chief Counsel of our legal arm, the Founding Freedoms Law Center, and by concerned parents to address the recently issued school guidelines relating to transgender students. As you may recall, these guidelines were brought into place by both the House bill and the Senate bill that became law, which directed the Department of Education to craft guidelines for the treatment of transgender students. The law takes it a step further, stating that all schools shall then adopt these guidelines as the minimum standard by which to operate their schools. Last month, during its review stage, concerned parents and citizens posted over 9,000 comments up against the website where these were posted, which, according to our count, were roughly 2-to-1 in opposition to the draft guidelines. Some comments addressed the concerns around bodily privacy for our young girls. Some noted constitutional concerns, either around parental rights or even religious freedom. It's our contention that these comments were not specifically addressed, as is required by the Virginia process that is in our law that guidelines need to go through, and that the guidance was finalized nevertheless. So the Family Foundation, Founding Freedoms Law Center, Hanover Parent Saravaya were among many individuals and entities whose comments were left unaddressed and largely ignored. So as a result of the failure to address many of the legal concerns as required, we have now become plaintiffs in a suit against the Department of Education and Secretary of Education Carney. We maintain our concerns that these guidelines erase basic parental rights and protection of bodily privacy and safety rights for even our youngest students. The Constitution of Virginia ensures that the fundamental right of parents to raise their children in accordance with their own beliefs does not simply get erased simply because the state of Virginia chooses to dismiss those rights to fulfill its own ideological agenda. So we now add to our concerns the utter disregard for the process of producing guidance documents outlined in Virginia law. The governor, his Secretary of Education, and his state agency have continued their pattern of ignoring the voices of average citizens and their concerns. I'd like to first turn things over to Jim Davids, Chief Counsel for Founding Freedoms Law Center, to share with you a little more detail about this filing.
Thank you, Victoria. Welcome. The lawsuit that we filed, and let me show you it. It's 30 pages with exhibits. The lawsuit that we filed highlights how the model policies that were issued by the Department of Education infringe upon the fundamental constitutional rights of students, parents, teachers, and other school personnel. The complaint focuses upon students, parents, and teachers' rights to privacy, due process, guaranteed under both the federal constitution and state constitution, equal protection, free speech, religious exercise, and parental authority. All of these things were noted by the appellants, us, as well as the Family Foundation, as well as Saravia, in comments that were made to the Department of Education. Our lawsuit seeks to stop the effective date of these model policies, so the department, as well as the school boards, have more time to study the effect of these policies, not only upon transgender students, but also on students who have no gender dysphoria. When the former chief of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University, as well as the American College of Pediatricians, questioned the wisdom of treating transgenders with extensive hormones or surgeries, because most of these students revert to their biological sex anyway before leaving adolescence, school boards should pause as to what's a good policy and proceed only with caution. When public interest law firms like ourselves, as well as others that have commented upon this, signal that these policies issued by the department have serious constitutional and statutory violations, the department as well as the school boards should practice prudence. Sit back, let's walk through this together. We're asking the court to send these policies back to the department to reconsider them and hopefully avoid expensive lawsuits. But more importantly, we want to work with the department and school boards to frankly avoid the infamy that accompanies poorly thought out governmental policies. I think any student of history will remember the internment by the federal government of the Japanese Americans during World War II, and how it took 30 years for an apology to actually be issued by the United States for that discriminatory action. I think we also remember what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen, government policy of testing them without their knowledge and consent. We want to avoid generations from now them looking back on our times and saying, what did we do with these transgender students who could have avoided this simply by being left alone? And that's why we think, frankly, there is considerable wisdom in the oath that's taken by physicians. Do no harm. Let's do no harm. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Sarah Vaya, mother of students in the Hanover School District. As you know, some localities have already moved forward with policies that impact both the transgender students and the group of students who do not struggle with gender dysphoria in regards to their privacy rights. We've seen localities move forward with elements of these policies that have also affected teachers, such as West Point, where we had a teacher terminated over the non-use of pronouns. These things have already proceeded in certain areas, and we've already seen the challenges with them. Sarah represents a group of parents that have struggled through this in the Hanover area. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Victoria. As a mom of 2 children attending Virginia Public Schools, this policy concerns me because it usurps and undermines my authority, my parental authority over my children. I have a young daughter who will be attending middle school next year. She is emotionally immature, very immature, but her body is rapidly developing into a young woman. Like most girls, she wants to be modest and wants to choose when a biological male can see her body. How is it appropriate for biological males and school administrators to take that choice from her? This has occurred in Hanover County Public Schools already, and the girls were forced to undress in front of a biological male against their will, and they feel as if the school system and trusted adults failed them. Such policies that would withhold the knowledge that students of the opposite biological sex are to be using the spaces my daughter feels as safe and private does not allow me as her parent to discuss and prepare her for this disturbing situation. Also, what if there are known or unknown histories of sexual or physical abuse perpetrated by a member of the opposite biological sex? Those students will face irreparable mental harm and potentially danger in sharing bathrooms and locker rooms. A parent must have an opportunity to address the sorts of issues and problems with each other, with school officials, and with medical professionals. Additionally, how can withholding information from parents that their own child is requesting gender affirmation of the opposite sex at school? This is a huge life-altering decision, and as we all know, children need the support of their parents to succeed at most anything and everything in life. This policy encourages a child to live a double life, act one way at home and another at school. Do we know the long-term effects of this situation on a child's mental health? Lastly, in disciplining a student based on an incident or complaint without parental notification or presence carries significant ramifications. Just because the school wants to have such authority, it cannot ignore the child's due process guaranteed by the Constitution. Parents cannot be held legally or monetarily responsible for incidents or complaints if they're not even involved. I want to thank the Family Foundation for their help in helping me address these issues in my community. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And next I'd like to introduce to you Kristen Allen. Kristen Allen represents a group of parents out of Arlington called the Arlington Parent Coalition. And really what needs to be highlighted here is that communities are different places with how they grapple with this issue. But it is not a partisan issue, it's not a geographic issue. There are parents in every community that share these concerns about the bodily privacy rights, the religious freedom, and their parental authority. So thank you so much, Kristen, for joining us.
Thank you, Victoria. Arlington County has been dealing with these model policies in practice in Arlington County for the last 2 years. And so we've seen the fruit of a lot of this. Parents need to understand that they can no longer protect their children in public schools. The agendas and demands of wealthy transgender advocacy groups like the Human Rights Campaign are reaching into our classrooms to direct the development of our children's very identities. Arlington Parent Coalition is deeply concerned for the welfare of children who struggle with gender dysphoria. Among our members are parents whose children's identities have been stolen by this movement. We have seen that the current policies lead to damaging outcomes for these students while demanding transgender ideology indoctrination of all children. Parents and taxpayers who recognize the value of safe and private spaces for girls and women, parental rights, biological reality, and First Amendment rights should be alarmed and outraged about what's going on. In past generations, family life education took place during 1 week of health class. There was an expectation that a child could opt out of lessons that were out of sync with the family's values. Those days and those protections are gone. Because sexual orientation and gender identity are being repackaged as civil rights, radical, ideological, and political messages are now woven into the core curriculum. Our children in kindergarten through 12th grade are indoctrinated through assemblies and speakers at school, explicit books in classrooms and libraries, themed sexuality and gender celebrations, posters in hallways and classrooms, peer recruitment for transgender identity clubs, compelled speech and thought under threat of being punished or ostracized, while differing viewpoints are silenced. In Arlington County, we already have had transgender adults reading to kindergartners, in which case they are told that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. Students being forced to sit through disturbing gender identity training even after asking if they could leave. Schools hiding students' transgender behaviors from parents. Schools ignoring instructions from parents to not reinforce their child's belief that they were born in the wrong body. Teachers providing sexually explicit books in their classrooms. Great confusion is taking root because of these lessons and materials. Young children are being compelled to define their sexuality before they have even entered puberty. Parents and concerned members of the community need to raise their voices to protect our children from predators and opportunists who seek to shape their hearts, their minds, and their sexuality for profit in politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Sarah and Kristen just represent the vast number of parents in every community that are struggling through this. Many who know what is about to arrive in their community, and some communities that have already seen, as Kristen mentioned, the fruit being born out of a policy that is looking at a small number of students and failing to address the privacy rights of a large number of students. So with that, I'll take any questions that you all have or direct them to maybe whoever would be best served to answer your questions.